Microphone check, microphone check.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to everybody, to the public, to councillors, and to all of those listening. The routine of preparing ourselves to leave the building, many know, but I'll read it through. There are no practice alarms planned this evening. One sounds, follow us down the town hall, main staircase, back staircase, the high street to the car park behind the town hall in St Rumbold Street. In the case of any disturbance, which requires a cabinet to withdraw, councillors should withdraw to the mayor's parlour using doors behind me and await further advice. This meeting is being streamed live over the internet on the council's YouTube channel and also be available to listen to afterwards. Use of mobile phones and other devices, including cameras by visitors, is welcomed. We're requested to use them discreetly, not to disturb the meeting, to set them to silent, which I must do in just a moment, and not use voice or camera flash functions. Speakers, and I know we have a number tonight, many of you will know what to do, but I will remind you at the time, microphones are to be used at all times. So let me give an introduction to the work Cabinet. The Cabinet's the main executive body of the council. It's responsible for day-to-day decision making to full council on major policy issues and on the council's budget. Cabinet's made up of 8 councillors. You can see them around this table, each of whom is responsible for a particular range of services. I'll introduce myself and catch the attention of my colleagues. I'll ask them to do the same. So my name is Councillor David King, leader of the council to my right.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Mark Corey. I represent Wivenhoe and I am Cabinet Member for Resources.
Good evening. I'm Councillor Michelle Burrows, Wivenhoe Ward Councillor and Portfolio Holder for Leisure, Culture and Heritage.
Good evening, Andrea Luxor-Ford, Ward Member for Wivenhoe and Portfolio Holder for Planning and Environment.
Good evening, Councillor Paul Smith, a Member for St Anne's and St John's and Portfolio Holder for Housing.
Martin Goss, Mile End Ward, Neighbourhoods and Waste Portfolio Holder.
Alison J, Highwards Ward, Portfolio Holder for Economy, Transformation and Performance.
Natalie Summers, St Anne's and St John's Ward and Portfolio Holder for Communities.
Richard Clifford, Democratic Services Manager. Andrew Weavers, Head of Governance and Monitoring Officer.
And Donnelly, Chief Executive.
Thank you all very much. Excuse the frog in my particular throat. Item 2, urgent items.
There are none, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Item 3, the minutes. I invite Cabinet to approve the minutes of the meetings of 12th of July 23. Thank you very much. Item 4, declarations of interest. I invite Cabinet members to declare any. None? Okay, thank you very much. And then item 5 gets us to have your say. I have Sir Bob Russell, Nick Chilvers, and a local resident on another matter. I'll ask them to come up in that sequence. If there are no others. No, then Sir Bob, would you please step forward?
There's a public speaker under item 7.2 as well, Chair.
Thank you. I'll get to that when we get to it. Thank you very much indeed, then. Sir Bob, welcome.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, my inquiries, I've yet to come across another council in the country with a cabinet set up that we have in Colchester, where the cabinet is drawn exclusively from a group comprising fewer than a third of the council. I have raised this before. It's not democratic, it's certainly not liberal democracy. A defining feature of the Liberal Democratic Party is proportional representation. You have an opportunity for proportional representation and you haven't taken it. That's on your conscience, individually and collectively. My conscience is such that I cannot sit silent while that happens, and I will continue to highlight that abuse, I would say, of town hall power. Chairman, I'd like to talk about the Town Deal Board, or We Are Colchester, at their last meeting on the 17th of August. Only 6 of the 15 took part in what was a virtual meeting, so 60% were not there. And in fact, one member hasn't participated since I believe it was 2021. Be as that may, the question I want to put, Chairman, they are a quango, and the only democratically elected member from Colchester on it is the leader of the council, you at the present, Councillor Dundas for his year, and prior to that, Councillor Corey. So it's a quango. And what I'd like to ask, because I've done FOIs and I haven't got the answer, or if I've been given the answer, I haven't found it in the answers, is that when did Colchester City Council hand over Holy Trinity Churchyard to the Quango Town Deal Board? Was it councillors? Was it a councillor? Was it a group of councillors? When did it happen? What was the date that it happened? Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Bob. Let's take those in reverse order. We have spoken on both matters before, but I'm happy, and I will come back to you in writing, I think, on the last point of that We Are Colchester Board, because clearly the understanding we tried to convey hasn't got to you. If you've asked for FOIs, I assume they're around the nature, structure and the background of the We Are Colchester Board. I'm sure that in, I think it was full council you raised this, I certainly tried to be clear that it's a government obligation upon those seeking levelling up and town deal funding to create an independent structure. The We Are Colchester Board is that independent structure to enable us to deliver the town deal. Well, I have to sort of say, I look at this completely differently to you. They are a group of colleagues and partners, including local businesses, who add weight, strength and understanding to our deliberation. And those deliberations that set up the town deal, that secured the funding, that agreed on the projects, were done with councillors of the City Council and a council. So there is absolutely democratic engagement, democratic driver. And as I've said to you before, the progress and the process itself has been challenged and walked through the democratic processes of this council through governance and audit and scrutiny. So it's entirely appropriate. It is an obligation. The alternative would be to say we will not bid for funds that will make our city a better place. Your narrower point about the Holy Trinity Church has to sit in that context, and we'll follow that up, Sir Bob. I'm very happy to sort of talk to you in a more private setting if you would like to have that to help you understand why we've done this, but it's the reasons I've described. It's an essential part of securing funding to make our city a better place. On your first point, and this is now respectfully the third or fourth time we've raised this, the answer frankly is going to have to be the same, isn't it? You are a parliamentarian with a distinguished background. You know it's about having a majority in the House or the chamber you're in. The only people who could form a minority administration that would have the support of others were the Liberal Democrats. You know we sought to work alongside our Labour and our Green Party colleagues, and our Labour Party colleagues were not able to join us, but they have agreed publicly and openly to the programme of work based upon the budget that was passed by full council. So it's a practicality, it's a necessity, and it's absolutely a democratic mandate, unusual though it is. Thank you. You can come back, sir.
Yes, I absolutely will. I don't accept that logic at all. Remember, I was once leader of this council. We had a democratic structure involving all councillors in the decision-making process. When the cabinet system came in, there were 5, not 8, 5 members, 2 Liberal Democrat, 2 Conservative, 1 Labour, representing the strength of political parties. Of course, that's the way it should have been done. You could have done it 6, 2, 2, 2, and the money saved and 2 cabinet posts could have perhaps gone in to save somebody's job. But coming back to the town deal, at the minutes of the 17th of August, 11 items mentioned were noted. There's no explanation as to what it is that's being We know what the decisions, what has been noted, but all the background papers aren't there. So the minutes are not complete. They are not complete. They are a quango. And I'll just finish on this one. This is not a criticism of the county councillor representative. He comes from Braintree. He's got a very good attendance record. But he's from Braintree, not Colchester. We've got 9 county councillors. And he was substituted last week from a councillor from Epping. I rest my case.
Paul.
Thank you very much, Leader. I do recall back in the distant past when the SDP Liberal Alliance first formed an administration on this council, we were in a minority and the leadership roles went to the SDP Liberal Alliance, Sir Bob. So this is something which all politicians have done, not just recent ones. And to your first point, I would also suggest that perhaps you might like to refer to the Labour Party's National Executive Committee and their role in this. Indeed, the same NEC that appointed the leader of Birmingham Council without any reference to the councillors in Birmingham. So I would ask you to look into those matters as well.
Chairman, Councillor Smith's memory is muddled. Because, of course, the system he's talking about is when all 60 councillors were engaged in the democratic process. Every single committee was proportionally represented. It's a different system. So comparing apples and pears doesn't wash.
Thank you, Sir Bob. Welcome up, Nick Chilvers. Nick, you know the form. You are, of course, welcome.
Thank you, Leader. Regarding the master plan consultation, public have had their say. At the local plan committee, we heard favourable remarks to the effect that the document was impressive. Well, it was. There was a lot of it. But that wasn't the time for the nitty-gritty. I've read the responses from the public online. The bid, Civic Society, Cycling Campaign, and others, including Nick Chilvers. I couldn't see any from councillors. Have they been logged separately? Have they been asked directly for their comments? Surely, as the city's most important people, they should put their likes, dislikes and questions about this plan out for the public to read. Councillors can read what I've said, but I can't read what my councillors think, and that's not right. I hope some don't think, well, it doesn't affect my ward, so I'll keep my head down. All borough residents use the centre and drive through it. It's an important matter. It's time for everybody, especially councillors, to stand up and be counted. It would give us a chance, the public that is, to see who steps up with an opinion on the detail. In my view, officers should not present a response to the consultation until councillors have made their submissions in the same way as the rest of us have. Isn't that proper due process? What do you think? Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. I think it's an interesting point about the visibility of contributions. I completely get that, and that's something perhaps for us to think about in terms of our own advice and guidance to fellow members. But there is, and I saw your thoughtful letter in the Standard last Friday, making a similar set of points. There are a number of ways out of sight, not to exclude the public, but to ensure that there is a really robust conversation where there is just that. And if you know any of the members, and I know you do, you know that the one thing we don't lack is opinion. Some of it very informed, some of it driven by what is said as circumstances or personal experience or resident views that they think are influential for them. But absolutely, members are a crucial part of this process, and they will be taking it forward. So once all of the consultation results have been analysed and looked at, that will be shared. It will be made public, at least in summary form. Members will be taken through that again. So we are not at the end of a process, which absolutely does involve members. We're towards the close of a process, which in itself is still subject to the realities of planning, applications, and the detail which will come with regeneration proposals stage by stage for the city in the coming years. So this is a very, from our perspective, important beginning. Councillors are absolutely at the heart of it, and there's a lot more to go yet, and a lot more to hear from my fellow members, I'm sure.
Thank you. I have to say, I don't think that's good enough. I want to see them in writing. Otherwise, what will happen is that the officers will give feedback on consultation. It will go into a debate which will go all over the show. Some people will just be pontificating. Nobody will get down to the details. It would take nothing, 5 minutes, to send an email out to 51 councillors and say, can we have your responses to the consultation, please? And we'll log them. And then the public can see. Then they can have their verbal showdown afterwards.
I hear what you're saying, Nick, but the point I will stress again is that the members of this council have been deeply engaged, all those who wish to, and many have been, and there will be many opportunities in depth and in detail to have their voice. And they're entitled to do that in privacy as well as in public. You will understand that can sometimes make for a richer conversation and a better contribution, but it's not, I'll make it very plain, it's not a closed process. If it was a closed process, if we were to do it as some suggest in-house, we are consulting the public for a reason. We're inviting members to have their say, absolutely, and that will come together not in just an officer speak, an officer view, but in a collective one, which is the best take we can make of what we've got to do with the city that we've got. But thank you for your view. I will ask a local resident who wants to talk about antisocial behaviour at St Mary's car park to come forward. We're ready for that, aren't we? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I'm here today to raise issues that we've been having in St Mary's, which is just next to the town centre. I know this meeting is due to discuss antisocial behaviour in the town centre and the surrounding areas, so I just wanted to let you know about the issues that we experience day in and day out. I moved to St Mary's in 2017, and since then there has been almost 300 incidents that either I've experienced firsthand or my neighbours have raised to me of antisocial behaviour in St Mary's car park. Despite us regularly logging these with the council and the police, little progress has been made to prevent that antisocial behaviour. Some steps were taken in 2017 to put the speed bumps on the top floor, thanks to Mike over there, but this has moved the problem down to the lower floors and the sound is amplified. So it's actually even louder where we live now, and it does affect more of the surrounding streets. Various public spaces protection orders have been in place over the last few years, and obviously we've got the new vehicle one now from September, but even that has still not prevented the issues. In fact, it's currently worse than it's ever been. We've had 13 incidents in the last month. On top of the car park, in the last 30 days, we've had an attempted house break-in, someone trying to open car doors, antisocial behaviour from the town centre spilling over to Pope's Lane, which is just next to St Mary's car park where the bridge is, and someone knocking on doors asking for drugs. There are around 200 residents who live close enough to the car park to be disturbed by the antisocial behaviour, including young children, shift workers, elderly people. We're all being woken up at all hours of the night. Some of them struggling to get back to sleep. It's really making us disturbed, exhausted. Just 2 weeks ago, in fact, somebody was disturbed working from home on a Tuesday lunchtime. The car park is obviously very busy during the day, but this still doesn't seem to put them off, even in the evenings when it's busy from the Mercury Theatre. It's just a matter of time before somebody is seriously hurt from the speeding and the reckless driving that they do in there. My neighbour actually went in there the other night and saw them with a speed gun, filming them and seeing how fast they could go. There's no preventative measures in place to stop it happening any time of the day or night. And what about the reputational damage to our city as well? Those visitors coming to the Mercury Theatre, I know full well it happens at 10:30 at night on a regular basis. When all those people are coming out of the theatre, would you want to come back to Colchester after experiencing that? The local government ombudsman have said that, you know, councils are not doing enough to tackle antisocial behaviour, and I totally believe that in this case that is definitely true. The enforcement-based approach is not working. There's hardly any cars there overnight, 20 on a weekend and about 10 overnight. I just don't see that can justify it being left wide open 24/7 for this antisocial behaviour to continue, for the loss of amenity in our own homes and the duty of care of the council and North Essex Parking Partnership. You know, we need something to happen to help us. This is a persistent problem and enough is enough. Please help us.
Thank you very much for bringing this to our attention, and you have done, both personally and collectively. Chief Exec and I have been amongst those that you've contacted recently. For context, it'd be right to say that there's been speaks of this before and largely tamped down. This must certainly be my understanding, but I know that you've got significant issues, and frankly, we feel for you and your neighbours. And those are easy words, but we do mean it. You should be able to have a peaceful night. You shouldn't have to put up with what you've had to put up with lately. Now, I have passed a message to you ahead of, not knowing you were coming tonight, I hasten to add, ahead of contact from our officers, but we have had an initial review this week to look at the range of measures. For me, I'm sure we can and we must get additional high quality CCTV in every place that matters in that car park, so that anybody who behaves in a way they shouldn't, it may not be at the moment, but in the days that follow, we can follow up with enforcement action, which at the extreme, you will know, can include seizure. Bring it on, I say. Yeah, we are looking at barriers. The cost and practicalities to this is still a working car park, taking through the hours of night. Taking your point, the numbers are still small, but we have a range of measures. I've given you some sense of that before tonight. Our absolute promise is we're going to do all we can to put a stop to this. You deserve better. We're committed to tackling ASB. It's a subject we'll get to later. We've been working with the police. I think in many respects they're doing a brilliant job. We need to remind ourselves it's not them, it's the others that create the challenges for our city. And we accept that includes reputation. So this is a great place, and I know what a fan you are of the city and your neighbours also. So we're on it, and we'll be back to you. And I thank you for bringing it publicly to our attention.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, and St Mary's as well, it's a great community. We all love it. You know, one solution is we could just all move, but we don't want to do that. You know, we're a really good community there. You know, we're all looking out for each other and trying to make something happen. So I appreciate your comments. Just in terms of the police, I know they have suggested barriers to you on numerous occasions across the last few years, and that, as far as I can see, has always been rejected as an option, which is frustrating for us because the removal of the barriers in 2016 was actually the cause of this problem. And it was flagged up very early to the North Essex Parking Partnership because somebody who actually lives near us for them at the time and said, they kind of just said, well, there's nothing we could do about it. Well, unfortunately, that's just good enough. And now we're here 6 years later and it still continues. So CCTV is also really frustrating. And we know, and I've got an FOI out at the moment, so I'm just waiting for the results of that. But I know that, you know, I think it's about 20 warning letters and 1 fine since the new vehicle public spaces protection. So that's a year. So that's not enough. The amount of incidents we log, that success rate of enforcement is very poor. So that's why I just think some preventative measures are also needed.
I want to be very clear, that's on the list. As far as I'm concerned, unless there's really strong reasons why we don't do it, it's not for me to make those decisions here in public, but I absolutely say to you that's on the list of things we will look at. If nothing else will work, we'll have to find a way that does. And enforcement and follow through are absolutely essential for your confidence and that of others. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I have Councillor Scordis, I think, next. Is that right? Lee, please. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight I wanted to speak on the topic of the hive. So, as you'll be aware, Councillor King, the Hive Task Force is essentially on hold, as our MP seems to be chucking the ball in our court, as well as Essex County Council and Anglian Water, fed up of, well, I think what my ward colleague described as Groundhog Day with meetings, where we're just repeating the same things and not seeing any action. And what I'd be interested to see is what role you see yourselves taking in that, because it does seem that our MP has absolved himself from any responsibility here, which is very disappointing. But we know that Essex County Council are unlikely to lead on this as well. And for me, the Hive is an area we need to look at to be a successful city. It's one of the main entrances into the city for a lot of traffic, and the main exit when they go home as well. It's where a lot of parents come to take their children around University of Essex when they show them around. And if we're being honest, it's not in the best shape. Over the years, Section 106 money has not gone on infrastructure in the Hive. It's gone to First Sight and other initiatives in the city. And we're seeing the after effects of that, where the Hive has almost become a dumping ground for students, which is really sad to see. There is some ongoing work going on around heritage and so forth, but it's very bitty in what we're doing. And for me, what I'd like to see is almost a mini version of the master plan that we did for the city centre. We do need to look at what is the Hive going to look like in the next 10, 25, 50 years. A lot of that area is allocated in the local plan, but nothing seems to be moving there. So I think it would be good for the council to, moving forward, look at a proper master plan with this area.
Thank you very much, Lee. I've had the pleasure of attending the task force, and I understand the sentiments you've described, and colleagues as well. I've just written back to our MP to set out the position that this council has to have, which on the facts is to say, as we must, that we cannot act and intervene in areas where we do not have the authority. It's not just an issue of responsibility, because that can sometimes be a question about what resources you think appropriate. It's where we have the authority. We don't have the authority in this area of flood management and water management that those two authorities do. One, Anglian Water has offered a pretty token contribution to whatever problems need to be resolved. The other, to my knowledge so far, the county has been silent. We will play our part, is our position. That was our position. We have been, it seems to me, the go-between between different people to try and ensure there is at least a conversation of quality about problems and the possible resolution. And I know that that's continued. So we do have a role. That can include the release of some Section 106 monies. It could require more of us, and I think if it got us a solution, from my part, I'd want us to look at that seriously. But we need those who have the statutory responsibility to stand up, then we can play our part. I have offered genuinely that if the MP has had enough of this, and at one level I can understand it, then I would offer to convene that task force, heaven help me, and see if we can make, with my colleagues around this table, a rather more progress. Yeah? So we are committed to this, but you can't work on things over which we do not have the responsibility. I am attracted by that point around looking in master planning terms of what can happen and what should happen in and around the Hive. I think that could itself lead to us freeing up resources and looking again at what we might do that would benefit the whole sense of place. I recognise, I don't like the word dumped, and I'm sure you don't mean it in an absolute sense, but it has got a feeling of part done and part neglect, and I think that would be, I'll ask the Chief Executive and officers to take that point away. Thank you.
Thank you, and I think we would welcome you chairing the Hive Task Force. If the MP is not willing to do that, I think Colchester taking that step forward would be really good. What I also forgot to mention as well is we are looking in the papers tonight at opening up the river is one of the points mooted. A big issue we have in the Hive is that there is lots of, not just rubbish, I mean bulky items have been dumped in the river that haven't been cleared for about 3 years. And I have asked whether neighbourhoods can do that because we have done that in the past. Obviously there is quite a high cost, but it is very ugly when you look in that river coming out of Hive Station, which again could be quite a big important hub, and seeing all sorts of rubbish that has been dumped in there, from bikes to chairs to a mattress to cones and so forth. So that'd be something really good if that could be looked at as well, of how we can get rid of that stuff. It'd be lovely.
Thank you. And I'll ask officers to note, please, and Pam, can we follow that one up? We'll follow that point up as well. The river is everybody's, isn't it? And whatever happens in detail for the riverside, it's clearly a huge asset and a huge part of our history, and therefore, frankly, of our present. So I think that can fit with that conversation we will make sure we have around the future of the Hive and what can be done there. So thank you very much, Lee, for bringing that up.
Thank you all.
Right, colleagues, we'll go on to the balance of the business. The first item, which is treatment of war pensions in the calculation of housing benefit, and I'll get to my good colleague Mark Corey to my right.
Thank you, Leader. This paper sets out really a reconfirming that we continue to carry on with this localised scheme that is optional within calculation of housing benefit for our population. And what it does do is it disregards income that comes from war disablement pensions or war widows pensions. What it means is when you're receiving a housing benefit, when you're receiving any benefit like local council tax support, where we also use this same technique, is if you are receiving, say, £10, £20 in a week from this income, we disregard that as income. So we do not decrease your benefit as a result of something else coming in. So because you are receiving a war pension or a widow's pension, that is disregarded as income. We are being generous by saying, no, you deserve that. That is coming in. We're not counting that as an income. So you'll get the full benefit as you should do without that being taken off. So hopefully everyone understands that's the way in which we have to calculate benefits. If you have some income coming in, we use that grading to work out what you receive. But these two particular issues, which are quite pertinent to us in a garrison town, the war widows pensions and the war disablement pensions will be disregarded up to 100%. So it's not to a certain level, it's 100%. So they keep that amount as income and they'll get the housing benefit no matter what income they get from those two sources. So we are reconfirming that that is something we want to pursue at a local level with our local alterations to the housing benefit calculations. I'll leave it there. I'll answer any questions, but I think it's very much something we should do and a principle we should keep, supporting those disabled by war or widowed by war. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other observations from colleagues? If not, then do we agree?
Agreed.
Thank you. Next item is 7.2. I have a speaker here, Mr. George Johnson. George, you'd like to come forward? You'll find, I hope you'll find that out. Turn it on to get a red light showing. You've got a couple of minutes and a warning bell for a third. Thank you. That's it.
Good evening. Thank you for having me here. For the record, I'm Mr. X in one of the reports in front of you, and I just want to bring to your attention the fact that Colchester Borough Homes, the people that you pay for oversight of the housing for which you are my landlord, are failing people, primarily tenants all over this city. The fact that Even now, even after we've had to take a number of matters to the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman, we are currently having to consider now going to the Housing Ombudsman over the fact that our flat has asbestos flooring that is not properly looked at. They lift a corner in the room where nobody has ever walked and go, oh, the tile is intact, so there can't be a problem anywhere else. Well, you can walk on the carpet and you can feel how crumbly the floor is underneath. There's mould climbing up walls, and those outside walls have downpipes on them with holes right next to them. Now, it doesn't take a genius to work out that if you've got a hole in a wall, damp and moisture are going to be coming in. The person in charge of damp and mould at Colchester Borough Homes, first of all, on his first ever visit, attempted to tell me, and I have a degree in biochemistry, that it wasn't mould. And I looked at him and went, you're joking, it's black mould. I can tell you it's black mould. Do you need me to take it and test it? He then has come back and gone, well, it's not the holes in the outside wall that's causing the problem. Well, we've only got the mould in 2 locations, and directly outside there's holes in the wall. So one would indicate that it's the holes in the wall. It's taken 5 years to replace a boiler and radiators, some of which dated from 1985. And every single time over the past 5 years, we've been told, oh, it's the bathroom mixer taps, it's not the boiler. However, we've not had a problem with those mixer taps since the boiler was replaced. Process of elimination would indicate it was the radiators in the boiler. We have a very serious dust problem. Both my wife and child have asthma, and that dust problem is not mitigated by the continuous extractors, for which we're having to pay an extra £20 a month on our electric bill to run. It's not mitigated by regular hoovering and dusting and all the rest of it. It's still there. So my questions, and I will hurry up with them, is that would any of you guys like to live in a place that is filled with asbestos, somewhere that has a dust level so high it hospitalises a child in winter on a regular basis and affects his mother's asthma so much that her medication had to be changed just to manage her condition, where it's taken 14 visits by 3 separate companies to determine that it was a leaky radiator and a boiler that needed fixing. And also, and they've got a picture for this one, on all 14 visits, they missed a pipe that looked like that. So you can see the corrosion to the copper and the holes in the pipe. And we were very lucky. We were told when they were replacing the soil stack that it had never flooded prior to that. The fact that they still employ people and managers who told autistic people that to mitigate the problems in the flat, they should wear earplugs, and that we can't be reasoned with as we only see things in black and white. And finally, the fact that your management company choose to ignore the very clear recommendations of the occupational therapist, who they argued with first of all and sent us to county, who agreed with the occupational therapist over whether or not our son needs a garden and locks on the windows. Locks, by the way, that have only just been fitted in the last couple of weeks, after being pursued for a number of years.
Thank you very much. We had the briefest of conversations beforehand. Let me sort of say that Colchester Borough Homes are not separate as far as I'm concerned. We, the council, have our arm length organisations as part of the family. We, the council and this cabinet, take responsibility for what happens. A lot of good things do happen. We are a great landlord to many, and we provide housing choice when, and you will know and others will, when there are huge difficulties out there in terms of the private rented market. You know, we are deeply committed, passionately committed to improving our housing stock. And Councillor Smith might want to just talk to that subject in a moment, for that wider piece, but I want to address your piece. This is not for me to big up, shall we say, what we're doing, but it's the context I have to give, and I hope it's some small assurance, because we care about this stuff, because this is central to the health and happiness of thousands of people. You know, it's one of the most fundamental things that this local authority does, unlike many nowadays, for the people of Colchester. We're doing much else, but this is fundamental. So I'm deeply sorry you've had the kind of experiences that you talked about, which are touched on in summary only in the report and the finding against the council. I know that the things we should do in the narrowest of senses have been done. So, and I know you have a view on this, letter of apology and a review letter around the garden and a payment request for a token of compensation, which might be what it is. Those things have been done, and the Ombudsman would say tick. You and I have had in that brief conversation the spirit of this this exchange. I would like to see you when I'm back from some leave, and I will want this whole saga to be turned over as an instructive lesson in what can go wrong. I want the organisation and their staff by some great people to look at this afresh and see what they can take on board. Pam, you would agree with that, wouldn't you? Okay. Paul, is there anything that you'd like to add?
Thank you. Yes, I mean, Colchester Borough Homes looks after over 6,500 properties. It is extremely disappointing when the level of service does not meet what we would have expected. I'm also know there are many other opportunities to present this through tenants' forums, through local councillors, through the Colchester Borough Homes boards, and I would ensure that those representations are made through those bodies as well, because there should have been significant safety nets that should have prevented this system getting through here. And I certainly am struggling to understand why one or more of those bodies did not pick up the case of the situations that occurred here.
Thank you, George.
To answer that, we have had help from people like our local councillors. One of them suggested we use the growing beds that were in the kids' play area to help mitigate some of the issues we've got with our son's autism. Colchester Borough Homes' response was to remove the growing beds. So we have been reaching out and asking all along. My first interaction with housing was not a pleasant one, and that required our MP to get involved. Because I was told that, in spite of being autistic myself, because I had a job, they weren't prepared to help us. And I had that from the get-go. The whole thing has, and I understand that there are 6,500 people and all the rest of it, but you just need to go on the Colchester Borough Homes social media to see this is not necessarily an isolated case, that there are cases cropping up all over the place where the ball is being dropped, and that where things like the decent home standards and the guidance on allocations is not being followed. The government guidance on allocations says we recommend don't put children in a first floor flat, yet we still as a city are putting children in first floor flats. And the decent home standard says take things like asbestos and mould out, and we're not doing it. So, yeah.
I would say our housing accommodation is severely stretched. And if the choice I have is to allocate a flat, a one-bedroom flat, to a child, or offer bed and breakfast accommodation, which sadly may well not even be in the borough of Colchester, or in the city of Colchester, but in a surrounding area, with the impact that has, it's a very difficult situation. We cannot provide the ideal accommodation with the strains that we're seeing under our housing there. That said, the quality and the issues of mould and such like are issues that could and should be addressed. And if any of them are referred to me as portfolio holder, I will raise them, as I have done with other issues, with the head of Colchester Borough Homes and with their senior management to try and resolve those issues. Because I accept occasionally things do slip through the net, and we need to prevent that happening. And I'm very sorry for the circumstances that you and your family have found in. But I would just come back a little bit to say our housing stock is severe, the shortage. The average wait for a 3-bedroom house in Colchester now for a family is getting on for 3 years. That's the level of housing shortage that we have. And my colleagues will know I've been regularly saying, what can we do more to increase the supply of them? And the situation at the moment that we're facing is a worsening situation. More and more families are finding themselves in temporary accommodation with the Section 21 no fault evictions. And I know one of my cabinet colleagues, Alison Jay, just last week contacted me about a tragic case in her ward. And it is extremely difficult when we're having to say to people, all we can offer is bed and breakfast accommodation for a young family. And that is just absolutely terrible. So thank you very much for taking the time to come and put your case in a particularly eloquent manner. And I do very much appreciate that. And I can assure you that we will, as a cabinet, look to get this issue resolved as soon as possible. Thank you very much indeed for your time tonight.
Thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Colleagues, I'll go back to Mark on the actual paper itself, which has two issues. If you've been through this, you will see they're summarily described. Now, the number of formal complaints stands reasonable measure with others, but clearly we want to be as close to free of fault as is possible. And I think this has been an instructive conversation, reminding us that, of course, underneath the surface of a complaint and a problem that gets this far is a reality of disruption to the life of residents, sometimes to families, sometimes people who are vulnerable, and it has a long-lasting effect on them. So we're on it, George. Mark, is there anything else you'd like to say?
Not really, thank you. It's a must-do that we publish this letter, and it shows that most cases we deal with fairly, we deal with professionally. George's case tonight is an example where we need to learn and pick up, and you've both given answers that hopefully give assurance about how we'll deal with that particular case in Colchester Borough Homes and any other cases similar to that. And we've explained the strains upon our housing. We know the strains of local government across the country due to a lack of funding. We as councils offer some of the most basic services for people. We do need more money to do that, and both I and you, David, when speaking with the LGA, the Local Government Association, always do put pressure where we can, and with the District Council network, into asking for more support in housing in particular, but across a number of different services the council provide. So in particular, George, thank you for coming this evening. Your case adds a bit of light to this kind of report that we receive, and it's important to understand that we are the human face of the council in a sense. As councillors, we care absolutely about every one of our residents in Colchester and the wider surrounding borough. So we take every situation and every complaint here seriously, and those that are upheld and those that the Ombudsman says we need to take further action on, we will. Thank you.
Are we so agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. The next item here is 2022-23, so this is the year that's gone. Year-end review of risk management, and Councillor Summits. William, please come forward before we get into the conversation itself.
Yes, I wanted to talk briefly on possibly what would be seen as a very boring item on the agenda, risk management. And just to say that there is a whomping great hole in the coverage. We've got a very strategic and nicely written risk management matrix, which I was part of scrutinising at the Governance and Audit Committee. And I made the point then, and I want to make it now, that it misses some of the big ones, in fact, probably the biggest ones we've got, which are project risks. And I ask whether any member of the Cabinet who's responsible for these things has seen the project risk register. I haven't seen it. I've asked for it, haven't seen it. And whether there is anywhere that this is actually looked at and scrutinised. And if there isn't, what are we going to do about it? There's the minute of the meeting just says, oh, well, we'll consider ways of adding it to the strategic risk register or something. We need to get right down and dirty and understand what the deals are going on in the Northern Gateway and elsewhere, and know that someone is systematically going through those risks, and we as councillors are missing out on something that really is our responsibility if we're not looking at it. That's all I want to say on it.
Thank you very much, William. Let me just address that before we get into the paper. If colleagues got more to add, Mark might. So just a first few reactions from me, because first of all, it's not boring. Who doesn't love a risk register? I would play back to you the fact that we had quite an intense conversation there with your colleagues, and Governance and Audit endorsed the approach that was taken and the report for 22-23. And part of the reasons it did it was because what it saw from Cabinet and from officers is more important than actually the structure and the calculation of probability and impact is the principle of risk management being a live reminder used by those who should to judge where they stand on the things that matter. And they include, don't they, budget and organisational resilience. Now, your points around project management risk arguably, clearly feed into that conversation. They're dealt with in the right place. There has been a lot of work on capital that will come through to members at the right time. Northern Gateway has been attested in terms of what's underway, in terms of Turnstone coming through. We've done that to death, in my view, and that's nearly ready to open. It'd be good to see it. And we have another conversation in 2 or 3 years' time about how we're going. The other side of Northern Gateway is, as we've recognised, and we had that conversation in governance and audit as well, it depends on the market context in which we're in. So we will be looking as an organisation and talking that through with members at the right time, which is not now, but will be later in the year. The marketplace, you know well, has completely altered. Our approach will have to take account of that. So I'm comfortable, although this is about 22, 23, and I'll ask my colleagues to pull out the points they think are important, that our approach is in the spirit of your remarks and helped by that debate in governance and audit and helped by the support of that cross-party committee. I'll stop at that. Is there anything you want to say before I go to Mark?
Yes. Can we see the project risk register? Is there any reason why we can't see the project risk register?
If I just come in there, yeah, what I'd say, I don't disagree with your thrust. Of course, it's so important we understand risk. And in this report, it's much more of an overarching concept. Both A, B and C, A and B are the highest of all risks. And that is absolutely fundamental in terms of the budget and delivering our savings, but also delivering on our capital programme is under that as well. What I think you may be getting at will be easier to do. We couldn't, what we don't have is in terms, there are a number of different projects. I think the capital projects are the biggest ones you may be referring to and the greatest risk. We do have risks associated with all of those and we do look at them. What I think we could do in a more transparent way is put the capital risks forward, because they come forward in our reports, but they're perhaps not done in the same way as this. Okay, so I could take that away and think through our capital programme work that we're doing, and we have got a workshop coming up soon, just to be more transparent about it. It would take so long and be a continual piece of work if we were to put every project the council does on a risk register, because there's so many different levels. It could be community projects up to capital projects. So all I'd say is the overarching projects are covered in this risk register. The capital projects, I think we could put together in a more transparent way for all of us to look at. And there was one other point I was going to make, but I think I have to leave it there because I forgot.
I think, thank you, I hope that helps, William. I think part of that workshop that's intended, I'll go to Portsmouth in a moment, is clearly an opportunity, but you can't do one without the other. And the one is the current status and standing of capital projects and the decisions that are going to be made. That has to fit with the conversation. Mark's got that in the diary to welcome a conversation. You can make that, Mark, as you describe it, part of what comes forward and then part of the conversation. But I am conscious with you that 51 members that may not be the best for us. So we'll take away the deeper point, which is that you have a particular interest in this for reasons I understand. I'll let you one brief rejoinder, William, and then I'll go to Paul Smith.
Sorry. I asked whether we could see a copy. I know that there is one because I've been told there is a project risk register, and I asked whether we could see it. And I'm getting the impression you don't even know whether there is one or not.
As I say, there's not a complete project risk register of every project the council does, but there will be a capital one that we can present in a more transparent way. So I'll go back to officers and we'll see if we can share that, and it could be part of that workshop that I was talking about.
we won't get time in a workshop to look at it. We really just need to see the project risk
Well, we
register.
respect William, we just said we'll provide what's needed to make that a meaningful conversation. Otherwise, there's no point in having it, is there? So there has to be an information pack that makes it worthwhile. Can I go to Paul Smith and then to Martin Goss? Thanks.
Thanks. I don't know whether I need to declare at this point that I was a member of the Governance and Audit Committee where this was discussed. I think there is a strategic risk register, and then there is the individual risk registers for specific projects that the council runs. And I think what the council is looking for is for the individual ones for certain specific projects. And I think that information is something which could undoubtedly be supplied to Governance and Audit Committee. It may be in a closed session because there may be commercial sensitive things there. I guess if we were, for example, indicating that supplier A is in severe financial difficulty, we wouldn't want to discuss that in there. But I think that's the sort of thing which I believe is what the council is asking for. And I think it's getting a little bit confused with the strategic risk register, which features many of the generic risks, such as the economy going downhill or what have you, that also might impact on a particular project. And then there could be a discussion for GNA to say which particular projects they are interested in seeing the full risk register for, because I believe there are certain specific projects that the council has got particular interest in, and other members of GNA may have others as well.
Thank you. That makes more sense to me. Could I go to Martin if you still want to speak?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think
Pam.
Paul's put it quite eloquently. I was about to give you a bit more detail, but every project that runs in professional project management terms, my job, should have a RAID log, risks, assumptions, issues and dependencies. But what you wouldn't do, for instance, the project I'm running at work, is the board of directors of the company that I work for wouldn't have a clue what most of the stuff in that RAID log is. I think in my SharePoint there's about 62 RAID items listed on a £3.8 million project. And there are lots of projects running, and the council is no different, that they're going to be specific to those projects. Now, some of those projects might roll up into a programme, and that programme might escalate some of the biggest risks up to a board level. And that's normally how risk management works in any organisation. So I think Paul has eloquently put back to what we think you're asking for, but there wouldn't be a central risk register for every single project. Each project would be up to having its own RAID log, managing it with steering groups, and then escalating accordingly those biggest risks based on scores of probability, etc. So that's normally how a risk management process works in any commercial organisation I've ever worked in, and should be no different here.
That's my view too. I'll go to Pam.
Thank you. I wouldn't normally take the opportunity to speak in this debate, but risk management is right at the centre of my thinking right now. And if any of you caught Max Keller on the radio at 10 to 8 this morning, he will have said, and it's worth listening to if you haven't heard it, you ignore the boring stuff at your peril. So whether it's regarded as boring or not, it's a top priority for me and the senior leadership board. So some reassurances. As Andrew has reminded me, every single cabinet report, alongside a range of other criteria, assesses the risk associated with the decision. So that's going on at a micro level. I gave some reassurances at a previous meeting that such is my concern about the level of risk, and that's not just for this council, but the risk resulting from the very dynamic environment we're in right now. I don't need to go into detail about that. The Senior Leadership Board meets on a monthly basis and reviews the Strategic Risk Register in detail, the next meeting being the 21st of September. In addition, the three statutory officers, myself, Andrew as our monitoring officer, and the Section 151, do what the LGA regards as best practice with regard to risk, and meet on a regular basis every month. In fact, we're meeting tomorrow. And at the forefront of every single meeting is the dimension of risk and any issues that are at play in the council that reduce our risk or increase our risk. And I think there's an issue here about terminology. The strategic risk register, which I've referred to, is looked at on a monthly basis, is a construct of a number of registers, which I think is what Martin is alluding to. So, for example, at our programme delivery group meeting, which does exactly what you might think it does, looks at the delivery of different programmes of work. There is a risk dimension running through all of that, alongside a whole range of other programmes, including the capital programme to which Mark is referring. I'd just like to finish by saying that the workshop that is planned for the end of the month is a really critical opportunity for us to expose in a safe environment the levels of risk that pertain within the council and how we manage that within our capital programme. I know for sure that a detailed, in-depth pack of information is being prepared so that we go into that meeting, that workshop, with the best chance of scrutinising every angle possible. I will personally oversee that to make sure that I'm confident that you have all the information to make that a meaningful endeavour. Thank you.
Thank you, William. Thank you. That was a helpful conversation. My thanks to colleagues. That's a really important distinction, isn't it, between this paper, which refers to 22-23, and the multiplex of issues and challenges in a very structured, disciplined way are being managed by officers with cabinet support through the months of this financial year. Okay, we'll look forward to that. Your project, Mark, with members and the pack that goes with it. Okay, let's go to the paper itself, which is around risk. I'll go in a moment to portfolio holder who has the unhappy task, or the happy task, of a huge range of oversight she could get into. I would just sort of say, really, well, I'll just say it's looked at with care, and we've gone through that conversation. There's depth and detail in here. It's been rightly tested in governance and audit. I'll stop there. Is there anything you would like to bring out?
I was just going to say exactly the same, that we have to remember this is based on an overview of the strategic plan, so it's not at a detailed level. It does say council objectives will continue to be met, but there are a number of high priority risks which have been identified. I think we need to take confidence that it's been overviewed and led by the senior leadership team. There is a confidence of governance in our own scrutiny and governance and audit, and all that's in place, that the risks are transparent and understood, and I think on that basis we should endorse the paper.
Thank you. Any other comments from colleagues? If not, we have the recommendations. Consider comment. We've done that to approve the associated risk strategy for this year, which has been given, I think, a good test, actually. We content?
Agree.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay, let's go on to item 8.2, which is the end of year again, 22-23 performance review, key performance indicators, and other performance news. And there's always loads. So again, if I just start us off, and I'll go to you, Alison. So for those who haven't read this exciting document, there are 13 KPIs, key performance indicators in there. 8 met or exceeded, 5 missed, but several only just, and high performance on those that we didn't quite get to, and certainly those that we did deliver. In the round, this is a strong performance in a very difficult context. Would you like to draw something more out for us, Alison? Thank you.
Well, I'd say that, I think we need to thank Cesara and the officers for a very detailed report. It does now include some very good comparatives, so we can see where we are in relation to others and our own performance in previous years. I have now had agreement that I will be provided with some monthly KPIs, so from next month we shall be able to track these on a month-on-month basis rather than so far historically. Those that are green are usually the customer facing, and I think the staff are to be thanked and congratulated for meeting those targets. They've done a really good job. Those where we know we're underperforming, and I think we need to take that in context. Some of it is only a slight underperformance, but we flag it nevertheless. Sickness, I have clarified that we do provide both mental and occupational health to the staff. It's available as soon as they need it. Looking at the monthly figures, there is already a big reduction. I think at a peak we achieved 9.1 sickness days. Our target is 8, As of July, I was told yesterday, we're down to 8.46. So we're seeing some monthly improvement, and it has been month on month. So it's useful to look at those figures. In terms of waste, we know that there's problems with the waste and recycling, but our landfill waste figures are down 6.4% over the year. So we're looking to keep that trend going. Recycling is down, but there's a number of outside factors on that as well. And we've heard previously tonight that housing, there's been recent robust conversations about the housing need and ways forward. So I think we can be confident that we're on top of those. And again, we'll see the figures monthly, so we can take proactive rather than reactive action.
Thank you, Alison. That's very eloquent. Thank you. Any other observations from colleagues? Are we content with discharged our duty here? Thank you very much. Okay, then we go on to end of year strategic plan assessment, delivering the cabinet vision and strategic priorities for 8.3. And again, the lucky person on this is Alison.
That's me.
You're responsible, Alison, you understand, for everything here. So over to you.
Okay, again, so this is looking at a delivery against our strategic plan in 6 areas: tackling climate change, leading sustainability, creating self and healthy active communities, delivering homes for people that need them, growing a fair economy to everyone's benefit, and celebrating our heritage and culture. As you can see from the backup reports, which are mainly narrative, there are a number of wins, and that the report recommends can confirm delivery against the 2023 strategic plan, but again rolls over into 23 to 26. I think despite the pressures we're facing, we are focusing on delivery, and I know a number of the portfolio holders are pushing a number of projects. And what I would hope is that in portfolio briefings that we're mindful of the strategic plan and those areas where each of us fit in to the overall. But again, I would recommend that this report is accepted and endorsed.
Thank you. Colleagues, intent? Mark?
Alison described it all well, but I think it shows that we're able to deliver as a council, and that does involve all members, not just this cabinet, and it involves staff who are doing an excellent job, despite, as we see the economic downturn and we see the cooling of markets, which challenges us in terms of development. It challenges us with the increase of inflation and the rates of borrowing. So despite all of the difficulties, and we see other councils struggling financially, we are meeting the KPIs, as you said in the last report, and we're meeting our ambitious plans. So I think that we need to work hand in hand with all councillors and with partners to achieve these aims that are in the report. But I think it's against the climate. We've just talked about risk. We're doing as well as we can, but the risks continue to grow. The risks with housing and homelessness continuing to grow. The risks with the asylum seeker issues that have been caused by the government. The problems with increased interest rates, the increased inflation. It just continues to come. The crumbling schools, the crumbling hospitals. We are having to sweep up a lot of these issues on a local basis, as well as stay in line with our strategic plan. So we're doing everything we can against a backdrop that really economically and socially is very difficult. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a reminder, this is the past period again. So we have a new strategic plan moving forward for the 3 years ahead. That is a crisp document that draws out performance, but is frank about challenge. And that's, thank you for Alison, for your reminder. That's what together each of us should do, and as a team, to try and make sure we're delivering as well as we can. This is going to be, as Mark said, a tough ride for the next 3 years and beyond. Let's go on to item 9.1, which is the impact of pylons on the area of outstanding natural beauty. I don't have a guest speaker on this. If I start us off, I'll go to Andrea Luxford-Vaughan. I just want to say, I personally, and I don't do this often, I've been as forthright as I can about this at ministerial and other level, because this is something on which full council and we collectively as a cabinet have a very clear view, and we've been well served by our officers. Andrea.
Yeah, I think it was an important motion to bring to council, mostly to make sure that every councillor was aware of the situation, and that the wider public were aware of the fact that we were aware of what's going on. But what I would say is in parallel to this, I've been working with ward councillors, with officers, and some members of the public, and right throughout any consultation from the beginning of the idea of putting global pylons across the countryside, we as a borough have very robustly objected to that and encouraged the work to be done on an independent review of an offshore option. I think some really great work has come out. I think with the input of other councillors, perhaps we as a council have become more robust. But you know, I think it's such an important issue that there's nothing wrong with that. And certainly that's what we were doing up until it was the official consultation. We were submitting to unofficial consultations. Now that the consultation full blown has come out under a different name, that commitment to exploring an offshore option has been restated. The detail to which we've been going into in the past about should an onshore option be forced upon us has been absorbed by National Grid, and now we've focused quite a lot on the heritage and dig things up. Archaeological impacts. This is a fascinating report. I've learned an awful lot about the area of outstanding natural beauty, but yeah, definitely this council has a strong position and have been working before and will do afterwards in accordance to the motion that was raised at council.
Thank you, Andrea. That's very well said. It's good that there's substance behind what we're doing rather than just the motion itself. We are more than in even the spirit of this. I love the fact that we managed to get a tone and balance between us with our officers' in-depth work that is sufficient to influence the conversation that lies ahead. Now, the outcomes we'll see, won't we? But you have to get that balance, and it's great to see it. So, Pam, I'll ask you to pass that to our team, Simon Cairns, if you won't mind to mention. Yeah, thank you, in particular to the team for all they've been doing on this. Anything else from anybody else on this? Okay, then we've discharged our duty. We're aware of and are acting on and were on the motion passed before council. Thank you very much. Agreed? Okay. Then we go to 10.1, antisocial behaviour in the town centre, and Councillor Mike Lilly. Mike, would you like to come forward, dear chap? Mike, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for allowing me to speak on ASB. So we had the debate in the council chamber a little while ago, and I see you had a meeting with the station commander. So I would assume that I'd like to hear tonight your plans for ASB for the town centre. Bearing the facts that, and we heard tonight, that we are going backwards in this town to where we were a little while ago, where when we were the coalition and we sorted out a lot of the problems that we had there. We all worked really hard to do that with the Team 10, cooperation of everybody, the wardens and that. So, and I know where the council are, you're really hard placed. You've had all your fundings taken away by the Conservative government. Police officers have been sacked, scrapped, they're leaving in the dozens and thousands. So I have nothing but praise for you trying to sort out the problems with that. But it doesn't help when you have the Chief Constable and you have the Crime Commissioner saying, we have never had more officers than ever before. And yet, we've heard tonight from a resident of St Mary's We dealt with that a few years ago, and I think the best solution was then we put in the mobile CCTV. We handed over all the footage to the police. The police went round and either fined all the motorists, and they did that. And that's all they have to do now. They are letting residents down time and time again, and it's got nothing to do with this council. We've done as much as we possibly could. And I say we, it's you. So we all know that 20,000 police officers were sacked in 2010, and the facts and figures have come out now. In today's reality, where we should be around the country, the figure should be 45,000 police officers serving as we are, with the natural growth over the years and everything coming in with no sackings. That's where we should be, £45,000. But in reality, we are just where we were in 2010 with just over 20,000 police officers there. So I'm afraid there's all propaganda in there. We really need to change things. The town centre, a lot of issues going on. The police need to deal with shoplifting, retail crime, which they ignore completely. I hate to quote a Home Secretary who's a Tory in that, but they've said they want to go back to basically what they should be doing and prosecuting every crime, including retail. There we are. So I would like to hear tonight what plans you have with them or what they come up with. There's going to be great discussion, great detail in the crime and disorder panel coming up, and I'll be a bit more robust than that in where we are. And I have voiced my concerns at the police crime panel with Assistant Chief Constable Andy Prophet and with the Crime Commissioner where we are. I didn't like what I had to say, but there we go. So I'd like to hear the plans where we are moving forward. One thing that does worry me, and I brought it up in, I think, Nat for the shadow meetings, is our wardens they're not allowed to use their walkie-talkies to call the police for help. The other week I witnessed a crime where one of the wardens grabbed hold of an assailant and one of our operatives grabbed hold of the other. He called for help on the radio. There were no police officers available because they changed the shift. But I understand now, after speaking to Chief Inspector Cox, that wardens now have to ring 999 if they want help in that position. That is not acceptable. They are putting our wardens in a terrible, dangerous position. If that chap had a knife, he'd have been in terrible trouble. Well, that's where we are. That's why I have a go, and I want things to be done right. So I'll leave it there, and I'd like to hear, I'll listen to your plans a bit later on. Thank you. And earlier, I agree with my colleague that we would like you to be chair of the task group. It wouldn't be Groundhog Day then, I'm sure it wouldn't. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that vote of confidence in a watery grave at Hyde. So, no, look, you will understand from all your past experience, and we love your passion, Mike, for the city and for this particular issue, because you've been deeply in it and you made a real contribution in the past. We'll see what happens next spring about who might make a contribution where, as a more formal coalition, rather than the informal one to which Sir Bob made a reference earlier. But on these particular issues, the depth and the detail, I think, is best done face-to-face with the police at that opportunity you refer to. They're going to come here. I'm sure that they will walk you through what they did with us. I will say this, I wasn't the only one who took real heart and confidence from what we heard. They are doing what, and I had some years alongside the police service at a senior level, so I saw something of this, although our business is a little different. They are intelligence-led, they are smart and focused, they were all over the issues that we raised, which included this. It's not to say that they're pleasing everybody. They need help and support as well, you will understand this. You need the public to report rather than to report on Facebook. And they need our support. Now they've got our support, and I know that's frankly nourishing for them. But we took real confidence that they understood the issues of the summer in particular, which And I'm not saying they've gone, but I think those of us who were there took real confidence in the attitude and the approach and the absolute determination to make a difference around ASB, petty crime, crime of all kinds. And I know you kept close to this, so wait until you hear more from them in person, but unless they really surprise us and surprise you, you should hear the right kind of story. They're working inside the context you described of the difficulties of economic and social problems that we have as a nation, some of which are in Colchester. They're working within what you described in terms of their lack of past funding. We know that's undernourished them, but they are in a much better place. I don't know if colleagues want to add anything. Pam, would you like to?
Yes, I'd just like to make a suggestion, if I may, Mike. And I know you're very familiar with the workings of the Crime and Disorder Panel, and you and I have sat on that panel for very many years. But I think there's a couple of things to do in preparation for that meeting that will make sure you get the information you need. I think that's to make sure that at the briefing, and I'm not sure who your representative is on the Crime and Disorder Panel briefing. Pardon?
Councillor McLean and Councillor Smalls.
Okay, so what they can do is to make it very, very clear at the briefing that this is a requirement of the presentation that Councillor Cox gives you. And I would also suggest that you speak to Councillor Summers about attendance at a community safety partnership meeting as well, where in a private environment you can really dig into the detail around some of the ASB and share some of the intelligence that would be shared quite openly with you, but would not be for the public domain. Thank you.
Mark, and go back to Mike. Mark.
Thank you, Mike. It's always good to hear from you. And yeah, I want to share the appreciation for the work you did in the past in this area. And in the past, in administrations that I had the joy of leading, we put money into the police force, creating that Team 10 in the town centre. And that is because over my political service, every doorstep conversation about police, I've said, I don't think there's enough police numbers. They've agreed. And I've said, when I ever have a chance, I will put my money where my mouth is and try and invest. Now, we did that in the best way we could, and it saw results. We're in a position now with the council's finances, as you know, where we cannot do that. The police are getting more money. The precept is going up. There is slowly numbers coming back, as you've outlined, but nothing like what there should be. So we are absolutely at a point where we do not have enough police numbers, and I don't see why all of the political parties are not talking about that more and actually dedicating to have more community policing support. We all believe it's necessary as councillors. One thing you talked about as well are the cuts, because I'm afraid the lack of funding for housing, the lack of funding for education, the lack of funding for youth services, the lack of funding for health has contributed to this effect of greater antisocial behaviour in our society. And I think you acknowledge and have alluded to that to some extent. So as much as I want to see more from the police, as much as actually I agree they gave us confidence when we spoke to them, it is a much wider problem as well, as you know, that it is causing us problems in society. So until we start funding housing, education, health, youth services and the police, we will not see a massive turnaround in antisocial behaviour. However, that said, the resident who spoke earlier gave some options. It's always good to listen to those most affected, and I think we will look at options for St Mary's as an example, and any conversations you can have, as Pam said, and with Councillor Summers as well, would be welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, I was actually picking up on a couple of points you said, actually. Firstly, I had a meeting in this very room with the neighbourhood leadership team, and I just said, you can say anything you like, and they did. And one of the things that they picked up was where they used the town radios, it should be city radios really, to call police if they run into difficulties. And when they've done that, nobody's come. So I picked it up with Chief Inspector Cox, so I had to wait a few weeks for a response because I think he was on a leave, and did make those very points on behalf of that team. And then I sent that exact message back to the team and said, I've delivered on what you asked me to do, here's the answer. I can't actually remember what the detail was. I don't think it said you need to phone 999. That may have changed since. Yeah, so I did do that. And then the other observation I had was actually when I was buying some goldfish about a month ago for our pot. And I was down at the Cowdrey Avenue retail park, and there was a massive kerfuffle going on outside the supermarket there. And this guy had nicked loads of stuff, and a huge security guard basically literally had him under his arm with the shopping in the other. And they called the police, and the police did actually attend and deal with the shoplifter. So that was quite surprising to see, I have to say. So the police do seem to be taking retail crime a bit more seriously, just from that observation. And I think some of the city centre businesses have said that they have seen a bit more action. So hopefully that is starting to turn that corner, particularly with what government has now said or is saying. Whether it's rhetoric or not is another matter, because where do all the police officers come from? But I just thought that was worth sharing.
I have a, sorry, I did get a response back from Councillor Cox. Councillor Cox, Pam said Councillor Cox earlier, and yes, it should be the Chief Inspector Cox. I copied you, Pam. And I did get a response back from him of all the questions I sent to him, but it was in the response of pages of graphs and facts and figures, and to me it's, no, I want to see, like everybody else, the visible policing that's on the streets, that does stop crime for people occurring of that. I want to see them taking action against other areas, and not facts and figures. We get that from the Crime Commissioner. I don't really go for that either. So, yeah, I'll look forward to the disorder meeting. Maybe one of our members will get sick and they'll need a sub, and you just never know, do you? More than 3 minutes, so I can see Andrew put his head in his hands, go no. But we'll wait and see. And but you said you'll come up with a big plan with the police to change things, and I'll look forward to hear that.
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. So on the big plan piece, I do take the point that it might be helpful for us to sort of set out where we are, where we're heading. But it is a series of steps, and the first one of which is that high-level meeting to reconnect with the police service and ensure we understand, and they hear and understand as well, where the City Council sees the challenge. I say, when you hear it, you hear a compelling sense for me of how they really have got under the skin of what drives the problem. They've been arresting, charging them and taking them off the streets. So they do get the message that, and the practical experience that Martin witnessed. I know he would have been in there, as big as that guy as he is, and sorted it out himself if he had to. But, you know, there is really good quality work. And I will say this, we have to remember that the importance of us keeping our own balance on this. It's important for public confidence and business confidence that we describe this as it is. You know, spikes come and go. We talk about what's happened for quite a long time. Let's have a constructive engagement. And we're on the edge of that, in my view. And I hope you have the right kind of feedback in person. We'll encourage that. Thanks. Please, Natalie.
Yeah, Mike, just like to say, obviously, totally agree with you on the police numbers. No argument for me there. And next Thursday, the 14th, have the Community Safety Delivery Board. Couldn't see you on the list, so do you want me to forward you that on? Yeah, you can if you want to. Yeah.
Come on, Mike, you love it. We need you there. Sir Bob, would you like to come forward, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I like to follow Councillor Lee because he and I live in a neighbourhood dispersal area, which is one of the joys of living in a CO1 postcode. I am puzzled about the motion because my understanding is that the mover and the second of the motion aren't here tonight. Am I correct? I may be wrong, but if that is correct, they're not here, then I find that remiss, to put it mildly. Chairman, I'm also puzzled because the motion quite rightly refers to antisocial behaviour, but you had a letter in the paper a few weeks ago saying it was halved from 5 years ago. So it must have been terrible 5 years ago if it's been halved, because it's bad enough for there to be this motion. And I hope you agree that the last thing Colchester City Council should be doing or supporting is providing additional places where antisocial behaviour can take place. But I regret to say that Colchester City Council is engaged in creating additional places for antisocial behaviour to take place. There's a good reason why the churchyards at the Arts Centre, St Mary All's Church, St Martin's in the Dutch Quarter, and St Peter's, the top of North Hill, are shut most of the time, if not all the time, and that's because of antisocial behaviour. And there's no antisocial behaviour at the moment in Holy Trinity Churchyard because there are railings to prevent that happening. But unfortunately, the Quango, the Town Deal Board, have come up with a bright idea to create spaces either side of the Saxon Tower, Grade 1 listed building, which will provide 24/7 areas of space for urinating, defecating, fornicating, and taking drugs. So we have 3 churchyards where the people in charge of them have taken the decision, because of the serious levels of antisocial behaviour, their churchyards are locked. So why is Trinity Churchyard got railings around it? I'll tell you why, because 40 years ago, 60 councillors debated the antisocial behaviour problems in what was then an unfenced Holy Trinity Churchyard, because the original railings were taken away during the Second World War as part of the war effort. And exact replica railings were brought back on a decision, democratically elected councillors, in a debate. 60 councillors used to debate to make decisions in those days. And at great expense, replica railings were put back. Result, no antisocial behaviour in Holy Trinity Churchyard for the last 40 years. And now the Quango, Town Deal Board, wants to remove the railings to create 2 areas where antisocial space can take place. And it's going to cost a bomb to create those spaces for antisocial behaviour.
Thank you, Sir Bob. Michelle.
Thank you. In my role as Service User Involvement Officer for Alzheimer's Society, I responded to the consultation on the Holy Trinity area because I was concerned that people living with dementia in our community needed to have an input into that space to make sure that it was accessible for them and the huge variety of needs that they face on a day-to-day basis. So a briefing was set up between HAT and some people living with dementia, and they gave us an insight into the plans for that area. And my understanding is, through looking at the ideas and the design, that the railings would be closed off so that that area could be closed off at night. It was just so that they were going to move so that you could have access into the church area for events and so on. But at night, there would be a closure so you couldn't get into the space. That's my understanding.
Greatest respect. With the greatest respect, that is not what the plans show. The plans show setting the railings back. You can lock it as much as you like, those railings, but the railings will no longer be on the street frontage of Trinity Street, and on either side of the Saxon Tower, open 24/7, will be areas where I can almost guarantee, because it happened 40 years ago, that's why the railings were put back, in a conservation area, and the council has a statutory duty to uphold conservation areas. That's another issue for another day. The proposals for the churchyard are contrary to the council's biodiversity planning supplementary document. That's another issue. But tonight I'm talking about the antisocial behaviour, and the removal of those railings will create 2 areas, 2 open areas where there will be antisocial behaviour, or at least the prospect. And the reason we've got 3 churchyards with their railings locked is because of the antisocial behaviour that took place. And the council in league, as I see it, somebody's come up with a bright idea with the Town Deal Board, is to create 2 areas either side of the Saxon Tower where antisocial behaviour will be available.
Yes, go on, please do.
Having seen the plans, it looks like that actually it's just almost like a broadening of the pavement space. That's what it looks like on the plans, and that was certainly what was discussed when I was in the meeting with the service users I was supporting.
Chairman, again, with the greatest respect, I've gone into this in great detail. I can assure you, widening the pavement is a euphemism for allowing these land on either side of the Saxon Tower to be opened 24/7. And one of the graves that we pissed upon is Mary de Val. Who's Mary de Val? She's a direct descendant of one of the Flemish refugees who settled in the Dutch Quarter. The historic gravestone will be in an area where there'll be antisocial behaviour. I'm sorry, and I do urge the portfolio holder to actually look at the plans, not what she's been told. Look at the plans, they're on public display in the library, and I can guarantee that the removal of those railings will create 2 areas of space where antisocial behaviour can take place. I wouldn't be here tonight otherwise.
Bob, but we made the point with respect 4 times. Last word to Michelle, and then I'll close. Michelle.
Absolutely, it's very important to be looking at the plans rather than being taking it for read what I'm being told. But my meeting that I set up with our service users at Alzheimer's Society were based on the plans that I saw. I took part in the consultation and then I saw the plans myself.
As did I, and we're here talking about the absolute negative. And of course, all sorts of terrible things and poor behaviours can happen. They're not guaranteed to happen. Let's be frank about this. We need to remember why we're doing this. This is because our city centre is a glorious place, but some parts of it are inaccessible. It's our duty to make the most. In my view, I'm fully behind the Quango, if you call them that, in wanting to see better for the centre of the city, for all the positive reasons why opened space and that glorious building with care, which we're not talking about, this is about care and attention in lots of ways of that building and its surroundings. That's what we're behind for the benefits to the public that will provide. Let's just agree to differ, Bob. Right. That, folks, is almost it. We've got progress and responses to the public. Richard.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think the report indicates that all the relevant responses have been sent or people have had their issues dealt with at the meetings.
Thank you very much. I know we actually should formally say, are we content with our approach on antisocial behaviour in the town centre in response to the motion?
Yes, agreed.
Thank you very much. Progress or responses, and apologies for taking us slightly out of order. We're content. It's good to see that that's being addressed as it is. Thank you very much, Richard, and to you in particular, but to all the officer team for managing that. In which case we get to one of the key duties for the deputy leader.
Oh, okay. Good, because I can't see that.
As we're not going to have a discussion of the detail, we can just agree the minutes that you've got in front of you and the confidential item without going into that either. Are we content?
Agreed.
In which case, I thank you all, the officers, for their support, and the visiting councillors and